Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So, right now we're witnessing some pretty atrocious, horrible things that parallel what's going on in this country and what's going on in Israel. Whether it's the shooting of unarmed demonstrators at the border of Gaza, or the shooting of unarmed young African-American men by law enforcement, demonization of immigrants, roundups by ICE of illegal immigrants here, demonization of African refugees in Israel by the government, the continuing occupation of 3 million Palestinians, fear and cynicism everywhere. But in the midst of all of this, my colleagues here, hand in hand, along with many of their friends, are building a model of what society can look like, what society should look like. A society that's shared, that's equal, that's just. I want to introduce my friend and young colleague, Noah Yammer, who's the Director of Communications of Hand in Hand from Jerusalem, and she will also introduce our recent high school graduates, Vicky and Alma.
When children grow up in the middle of a war zone, how do you make sure they don't hate every person on the other side? And how do you make sure that our past, one that's filled with violence, with inequality, with discrimination, with hatred, does not determine our future? Those are the questions that we're asking ourselves as Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs in Israel every day. And what we want to tell you about is the thousands of people who are part of Hand in Hand, who are trying to create a different future through developing a practice of shared living, of talking about things when they're hard, through education and through communities. Right now in 6 schools around the country, there are Jewish and Arab students, almost 2,000 Jewish and Arab students who go to school together in Hand in Hand schools. And there are thousands of adults who come together every day as part of our community programs in Jerusalem, in the Galilee, in Haifa, in Jaffa, in Kfar Kara, and in Kfar Saba. And we learn each other's languages, each other's cultures, each other's religions. And when things get hard, when there's violence, we put it on the table, we talk about it, and figure out what to do next, and how do we come to school the next day. But you don't have to take it from me. We have two recent graduates here at the schools who grew up Hand in Hand their whole lives and can tell you from their own experience. And what we want to talk to you about is both our personal stories, but also how Hand in Hand is growing from our 6 schools to more and more people, and the people who are asking to join us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vicky. I'm 18 years old. I joined Hand in Hand when I was 4 years old from kindergarten, and I stayed until high school. I graduated last year from Jerusalem. And I'm Arab. I'm Christian Arab. I lived in Jerusalem my whole life, and I met Alma when she joined us in 1st grade.
Hi, I'm Alma. I'm 19, and I'm Jewish. I live in a place next to Jerusalem. I also went to the Jerusalem school and studied in Vicky's class, and we both graduated 8 months ago. And if my parents wouldn't chose this school for me, I would never have met Vicky. Or I would never have met anyone who speaks the language or anyone who comes from a culture, because in Israel, in our country, we have 4 different kinds of schools. We have schools for ultra-Orthodox Jews, we have schools for Orthodox Jews, we have schools for secular Jews, and we have schools for Arabs. So people grow up in an environment that they're surrounded with people who are just like them, who speak their language, who come from their culture, and they never met the other side, or they never meet the people who are coming from different places. And in my opinion, it grows a lot of fear in them, because you never meet anyone who's not exactly like you. And this is why our school is different.
So that's why 20 years ago, a group of parents decided that they want to make a change. And also, Lee was one of the founders, as most of you know. So they decided that they want to make a change. They want their children to grow up in a different environment, in a peaceful environment. So they came up with Hand in Hand. It started from a small group of 20 kids, kindergarten, and as they grew up, the school grew with them. And as Noah mentioned, we have 6 schools now all around the country, bilingual schools that are 50-50, Jews and Arabs, that they learn in Arabic and in Hebrew, all subjects. And I grew up, I didn't study in an ordinary class. Like from kindergarten, I had 2 teachers, a Jewish teacher and an Arab teacher, and they both taught me all subjects in Arabic and in Hebrew. And we studied all 3 religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, both in Arabic and in Hebrew. And another thing that was really special that we had was a shared calendar. We celebrated all 3 holidays together. And I remember in our class we had this tradition each Hanukkah to gather all children's and parents and teachers in one of our classmates' house. It was called Emmanuel. And light up the menorah, eat, drink, laugh, like really get to know the other culture, experience the different holidays that I'm not used to experience at home. Like I'm sure most of you really wanted maybe to celebrate Christmas, and they didn't want people to really tell them why you're doing that because you're Jewish. So that's what we had. I'm Arab, I'm Christian, and I'm celebrating Hanukkah, and I'm celebrating Sukkot, and I'm eating an iftar in Ramadan, which is really special and unique, and you won't be finding it anywhere else in Israel. So yeah.
But it wasn't always easy. I mean, as you can imagine, me and Vicky come from really different cultures, from really different narratives. I was told a different story at home than Vicky was, and my family story is different than Vicky's family. So for example, my family story is that my great-grandfather, he was born in Israel. And during World War II, he heard that the Jewish people were killed in Europe, and he didn't feel safe, even though he was in Israel. He was living in a place next to what now is Tel Aviv. And he didn't feel safe. So what he decided to do is he decided to travel to Europe, he traveled to Britain, he volunteered to the British Army. He fought there for 4 years straight. He fought the Nazis with the British Army, and then he came back to Israel, to his house, and he found that he has a daughter. That's my grandma. He saw her for the first time when she was 4. And she is a person that I'm really connected to. She's a really important person in my life, and she was the one to tell me this story and teach me the values that her father taught her. So he came back to Israel. He was there for a few months, and then the 1948 war came. And again, he didn't feel safe. He wanted to do something, and because he has experience, the Jewish army at this time recruited him to be a commander in Israel, at Rehov, in a place. He was actually injured in that war. He was badly injured. He was in the hospital bed for a really long time. And he was actually in a hospital bed during the Independence Declaration in Tel Aviv. And my grandma told me that she saw her dad being safe, feeling safe for the first time, feeling really happy. And he felt that this is his home for the first time. He felt home. And this is what my grandma told me. She taught me how safety, equality, and justice are 3 main values that her father told her, and she told me. This is also what my school gave me. The school taught me those values, and I want to live by them now.
Well, my family went through different events and had a different experience at that time. So my grandmother, the mother of my father, she was born in a small Arab village in Upper Galilee, North Israel, called Bir'am. And she grew up as a normal child, got married, gave birth to her first 2 children. and 1948 came, and the Jewish military came in the village and told the villagers, we need to evacuate this village, you need to leave your homes right now. And of course the villagers did not want to, because who wants to leave their homes? It's insane. So the army promised that they will only leave for 2 weeks until they arranged the border between Lebanon and Israel, and that it was only for their own safety. So they said, okay, they grabbed a little bit of their stuff and went out and lived in tents for 2 weeks. It was November, December, and January. It was really cold months in North Israel at that time. So they went out, and after 2 weeks they came back and found the soldiers living in their homes. And they said, no, don't come back now, come back later, it's not safe. So they didn't know what to do, they left again. And I remember my grandmother, before she passed away, she always told me this story over and over again, how one day they woke up to the sound of destruction. They got out of the tent, they looked up from the hill they were in to the village, and they saw the village getting ruined and bombed in front of their faces, in front of her children's faces, which was hard for her. She cried, and that's when she knew she would never get her home back. She would never go back to the place she was born. Even though she didn't do anything wrong, she didn't reject leaving their home or something. So she was wealthy. She came from a wealthy family, and suddenly she didn't have a piece of bread to feed her babies, and that was hard for her. That was a shock. And I remember her always telling me how it was hard, but even though it was hard, she wanted my siblings and I to grow up in a different environment, to break the stereotypes, to open our hearts to people that are not like us in their culture only. So that's what happened. Me and my siblings joined hand in hand and grew up in a shared society, in a different environment, and got, as Alma mentioned, got these values that we carry on until this day, that we love the different people. We're open to listen. We're open to really get to know people that are different from us, and not to blame them for what happened. And Alma's great-grandfather, he served in the military, the same one that got my family out of their homes. But it doesn't mean I have anything against her. It doesn't mean I can't love her. It doesn't mean I can't share with her my life as a friend. And that's a special thing, a really great thing that I got from my teachers and from my school, which is really inspiring.
So we're not just telling you those stories because they're interesting stories. We're telling you those stories because this is the kind of complexities and difficulties we have to face every day by going to our school. So if I'll be honest, hearing Vicky's story for the first time as a 9 and 10-year-old kid wasn't easy. I mean, I didn't know how to not feel threatened by it. And as we grow up and as we kept on discussing it and talking about it and dialoguing about it, it became easier. And now I can understand her. I can understand where she's coming from, and I can carry her pain with her. So we face it every day and keep on talking about it all the day.
But what we're doing at Hand in Hand is also, it's not only about what's happening in the schools and in the classroom, it's also about adults, it's about the parents, and it's about the teachers. Because as adults, we didn't grow up together the way these kids did. All adults in Israel grew up in separate schools. And it's not only separate schools, but separate neighborhoods, and live separate lives. And so when we come to the school as parents, as teachers, as staff members, we don't have this experience. And I mean, I'm from the U.S. I grew up in New Jersey, and and I had been in Israel for around 15 years. I moved there when I was 18 years old. And I grew up in a religious Zionist community, in a modern Orthodox community. And in a community where Israel was a huge part of the way that I grew up. I remember I went to Jewish day schools, and I remember the walls of my classroom, there was always a clock set to the time in Israel, next to the clock set to the time. And in the morning, we would hear about the weather in Israel. It was a huge part of what we did. When I was in high school, my brother went to serve in the Israeli army. And it was during the Second Intifada, and I remember going to synagogue every week and just sitting next to my mom, who would be crying and scared. And the feeling that was built in me was a sense of, I'm very connected to Israel, to this place that's very far away. But I also have an enemy there, right? And who's the enemy? It's the Palestinians, it's the Arabs, as we said. And then when I came to Israel when I was 18 years old, the first week there I was at a funeral because my friend's father was killed in a terrorist attack in a cafe. And again, that sense of, this is my home, but I have an enemy. There's someone here who doesn't want me here. And I decided to move there. I said, this is where I want to live my life. This is where I want to be around. And as I continued to live there, I started to meet people who didn't come from where I came from, and started to actually, I'm a musician, and through music joined a music group that had Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians. And for the first time in my life, really, met a person who wasn't Jewish. I never really met any people who were Jewish in my life. My first non-Jewish friends were Palestinians. But also for the first time met these people who were from this enemy group, deep in me, a feeling of enemy, and all of a sudden started to blur, right? When you meet real people who are just kind, good people, start to blur my sense of, is it really my enemy? Do they fall into that category or do they not? And there were a ton of moments that started to really expand my sense of what's here. I remember once walking around the streets in Jerusalem with one of the Palestinian girls that was in this group with me, and we were handing out flyers to people for this show. We were doing a music show. And I'm handing out flyers to people who are walking on those cobblestone streets in Jerusalem, and I see a group of Israeli soldiers standing with their uniforms and guns, and I went to go hand them a flyer, and all of a sudden I feel this hand grab my arm, and I turn and look at my friend, and she's kind of backing away, and her eyes are wide, and she's clearly scared. And she's staring at those soldiers. And for me, it was so confusing, because for me, soldiers were my brother and the people that were protecting me. And I realized in that moment, I looked at her and I was like, I have a choice. I can listen and sort of ask her, what did she experience that would have made her afraid? Or sort of turn away and say, I can't deal with that. And for me, the choice was to listen, and to listen to stories of the soldiers who had killed her cousin, and the fear that built, the soldiers who came to her house in the middle of the night, and her hiding in the corner of her house. And reckoning with that, with those stories. I had a very clear sense of self. I had moved to this country, to Israel, with a certain sense of what it was, and all of a sudden there are things I didn't know. And that sort of crack started to form in that sense. And so listening can be very painful. But for me, those cracks really ended up opening up a much more whole sense of who I am and what I want to do as part of that country, and as part of a person who I feel very, very dedicated to Israel and making it a place where we don't have to fear. And when I came to Hand in Hand, I realized I'm not alone here. There are a lot of people who are doing that every day, who are choosing, turning towards, who are taking that step to listen. Teachers who have to teach together the two narratives that we heard here, the multiple stories of what does it mean to teach the formation of the state of Israel, of the war in 1948, and of the Nakba, the catastrophe of the Palestinian people, alongside the story of Jewish independence, of Israeli independence. And the teachers have those stories too. They have to come, talk to each other, and figure out how do we teach our class together. That's very demanding. And people are doing this every day, hundreds and hundreds of people. And that's why in every place where we have a school, a hand-in-hand school, we also have a community organizer who actually just works with adults, with parents, with teachers, with people who want to do dialogue, want to go deep, but also to create programs for people just to be friends, just to hang out together, to play basketball together, to do language together. And then once we build that trust, I remember once being in an evening for adults to tell stories from 1948. And one of the parents, the Palestinian parents, got up and started telling a story, her story of like just like Vicky's story, about a different village, about what her family lost. And around 2 sentences into her story, she pauses. You see she has tears in her eyes. She says, I've never told this story in Hebrew before. And I'm thinking, no one who speaks Hebrew is ever willing to hear this story. And the power I felt by just holding, by just listening, and the healing that comes from listening. Then understanding that once we have that healing and we can build that trust, then we have to do something. It can't just end with listening. Listening is important, but then we have to go do something together once we have this community. And that's what part of our community work is, actually going out and doing activism together, looking around us and saying, what around us needs to be fixed, and how do we do it together while acknowledging each other. And we're seeing that our schools are also not only about the people who are showing up at our doors, but also impacting beyond. And we see that also in our relationships with the municipalities, that we're a public school system. We function as part of the Israeli public school system like any other school. And because of that, we're also impacting the people who are the decision makers within that school system, like the Jerusalem municipality, who brings, already a few times, all of the principals from every school in the city to our school to say, okay, we want to learn from you. Or the Jaffa municipality, who just this last month turned to our principal there, the principal of our Jaffa school, saying, we want to start to implement integrated or bilingual education in some form in all of our schools. We're exploring this. Can you give us a proposal? How can we do that? And the Israeli media turns to us all the time and saying, we need to show people that this is possible, right? You don't have to be a student at the school to look at what we're doing and say, it's possible. We're not people here who are dreaming about living together. We're people who are learning how to do it every day. And we're seeing also that people really want this. This year, like I said, we have almost 2,000 students, but we had around 800 on waiting lists that we couldn't let in. And so our goal now is to grow, to meet the demand, grow in the number of schools, grow in the schools that exist, and grow in the impact that each school can have by being a resource for our communities and for our cities and for the society as a whole.
So just like Noah said, it's about a broader change. I want to see my school, some things in my school, in every place I go to in Israel. And that's what I'm trying to do now. I graduated, so I'm trying to take what I've learned from school and do something there and do something there. And right now I'm volunteering at the Knesset, at the Parliament of Israel. I want to understand how this democracy works and how I can maybe be a part of it at some point. And next year I'm about to do my national service, and I want to volunteer with refugees in Tel Aviv. And I think that what the school, my grandma told me is that this place is my home, and this place I can feel safe in, and I want everyone in my country and everyone in my home to feel safe just like I do. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I volunteered in the ambulance for 2 years, and I think that's how I can give to the community, because there were apparently Arabs working there and a lot of Arab patients, and I was from the first group of students who joined the ambulance and really can communicate with the Arab patients that really needed help and couldn't communicate with the ambulance staff because they didn't have a shared language or a way to communicate. And other than that, me, Amma, and I, we take part in the alumni organization, and we meet once or twice a month with most of the graduates. We have like 7 years of graduates, and we're meeting together, thinking out how can we stay active and how can we continue what we started in school, because it's not just that we finished high school and that's it and each one will just go in their own way and do whatever. No, we meet up again and still have this space where we can have dialogues and also be active and also feel safe to share our own thoughts, even though they're really hard and people around us can't really understand us. And I really believe that if we don't deal with our past, we won't be, and the past and the present, because also the present is really violent today, we won't never be able to control our future and really control our acts and how we're gonna continue with our lives, with the people that are in front of us. And people always tell me, like, why do you do that? Don't you feel like you're not Palestinian anymore? You're losing your identity? Well, that's not true. When I tell people about who I am, it only makes my identity clearer and stronger for me. And it only makes me who I am. And it doesn't mean if I can listen to her, to Alma's stories and to other stories, that I can be myself. No, it just makes me who I am more than anybody else my age. And I really feel that students and kids my age are not really able to think openly as we do, because they live in their own environment, in their own space, in their own zone, and really the conflict, they leave it on the side and they don't deal with it. And they don't deal with the fact that they need to speak about it, and they need to know what they think, and they need to deal with it, with these difficulties. So that's the thing we do every day. And even though I grew up to this environment and I didn't know that the world outside isn't the same, and as I grew up and realized that the world outside is not the same, I also took a choice to continue in the place I'm in, and to continue really taking part in this little thing right now. We're a small community that really makes a change, because I believe that each and every one of us should give their own little part so we can make a change. And if none of us gave this little part, nothing will ever change and be different. And I'm really glad of who I am today and where I am today in my life. And I'm really glad that my parents and my grandparents had these thoughts, because if my grandma, the person who went through these really hard times, could have thought differently, then each and every one of us today could also can. And I'm really happy I'm here today. Thank you all for your time, and Shabbat Shalom.
This mic around for questions. Okay, so wait till you get to the mic.
Thank you, that was so inspirational. I want to tell you that my work in the United States has been dual language bilingual programs, where children are learning simultaneously in English and in Spanish. And the goal is not just bilingualism, but connections to be made between Black, white, and Latino children. So the first comment, I have two comments, or a comment and a question. The first comment is, one of the things I looked at was identity, and one of the young ladies was just talking about that. And what I discovered was that all children in this program, and these kinds of programs that I looked at, Black, white, and Latino, not only learn to appreciate other young people, but their own identity was strengthened in the process. So I was really excited to hear you talk about that. Now here's my question. In these schools, there is no formal language instruction. The curriculum is actually taught in another language. So my question has two parts. First of all, does the Hebrew and the Arabic instruction take place within the context of subject matter instruction? And if so, what I've also noticed, because I've looked at these programs around the world actually, is that the classrooms all kind of look alike, because the classrooms cannot be textbook driven. Otherwise, nobody will understand what is going on. So it has the effect of pushing the curriculum in a very progressive direction and making it very exciting and really engaging the students. And I'm curious to know what your classrooms might look like, if they might follow this pattern that I've seen.
Translation for one second.
Explain what.
Yeah.
What your answer is. Like subject matter. So
Oh, subject. Yeah. So everything is taught in two languages. So also, I mean, English is taught in English, and Arabic is taught in Arabic, and Hebrew is taught in Hebrew. But everything else is taught in two languages. So also history and civics and like Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. It's all taught in two languages. That answers the question.
Yeah.
Understand that fully. And also how the class looks like.
Yeah, I mean, does it look like your typical Israeli classroom in terms of the curriculum and what you're doing? Or does it look different because all these languages are flying around and you have to make them understood? So the question is, does it force the curriculum to be more exciting and different?
Well, we have also books that are in both languages, but when it comes to high school, in the matriculation, you choose which language to learn, and then also the book will be, in Hebrew or in Arabic as you chose, because that's how Israel works, sadly. And in our classes, they're not this typical class. It is a normal classroom with a whiteboard and chairs and tables, but also around you'll see in the like lowest classes, like first grade, second grade, and third grade, you'll see letters in Arabic, letters in Hebrew, words in Arabic, words in Hebrew, also sometimes in English. So it doesn't look like a normal classroom. It has like really 3 or 2 languages, surrounding the walls in the class.
But I also think that at some point, like a really early point, because for me I learned Arabic from the first grade, so around the second grade really I could understand Arabic like fluently. So I mean, it doesn't matter what language the teachers speak or what language the curriculum is in. Most of the class, 90% of the class can understand. So I can't even imagine. I mean, I can't remember what class I was talking about in which language.
Hello. First, thanks community, because this is my first time here, except for a small Shabbat before. But thank you guys. Wow. I think you were sitting right across from me, and is it true at the table?
Yes.
Or, okay. I'm actually glad I didn't know what work you were doing, because you wouldn't have been able to have a break. So I'm glad. My question actually is just about the present, because I think what you said first about getting past, moving not quite past the past, but dealing with the past and confronting it and reckoning with it, and then moving into the future. I mean, that seems like such a huge task, and you guys obviously have done amazing work dealing with that. And I know you guys engage in debates about what's going on now, but I guess my question is something like this. You said you can forgive, or not forgive, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you can deal with her grandfather having been in the army that kicked your family out of their homes. But how do you deal with someone who, maybe a friend who's in the army now and doing things that you may find abhorrent? And actually, this is for all of you, not just for you, Vicki, but how do people deal with things that either people from their culture or other cultures are doing now? And also, how do you deal with big disagreements that maybe the group at your school doesn't have? But I know that for some people, big disagreements come down to things like whether it's going to be called Israel or Palestine, or whether or not the people who were kicked out and whose families have been raised elsewhere will be permitted to return. How do you deal with those big issues? Yeah.
How I deal with my friends that are in the army right now was, first of all, I understand that they're forced to, some of them, and second of all, I have expectations from them, okay, that they would take their part and try to make this little change in the part they took, and also act in a human way in the army. So they won't really do things that would hurt me and my Arab friends. And what else did you ask about the how we deal with
The big disagreements.
The big
about what
disagreements.
constitutes an injustice that are
Yeah.
happening.
So as we grow up, we have dialogues that are really intense and really important, and they're part of our weekly schedule. And we learn there how to listen and how to give the other space to really give their opinion. And it doesn't mean we have to agree. Sometimes we really disagree, but we don't fight because we learn how to listen. We learn how to give the different opinions their own space. And yeah, I hope that's enough.
I think that in the beginning it wasn't easy at all. So around 9th grade, it was the night before 2014. It was one of the Gaza wars, and it was really easy. And it was really hard at the beginning to sit and look at each other and hear other people's opinions and just let them be and let them, as Vicky says, to bring them to give them space. But as we grew older and we had dialogues, and we had actually dialogues scheduled in a class schedule. As we grew older and we kept talking about it every day, and we didn't give up, and it was a hard task for us. It became easier, and now we can understand each other much better, and I think like in a cool way. Actually not going to the army because of the kind of difficulties you raised. So I'm doing national service instead. It's not an easy thing to do. And I think that it became also from a dialogue and also from a place of discussion with my classmates, because I could understand them better, and that changed my opinion about some things. And of course, there are people who does go to the army in our school. There are lots of people in our class who actually are in it right now. But there are also space for people to change their mind and maybe not go with the path they were supposed to.
Since you became members of this of Hand in Hand, how has your family's relationship with family, friends, and community changed or not changed?
Well, my family and my extended family are all supportive to what my siblings and I what we do, and their friends are you'll find people that will disagree and people that will see us as crazy people and as insane people that they don't know what they're doing. But on the other hand, you will see people that are really impressed, and people that they never heard of this before, and they'll say, oh wait, so something different can really happen here, and it's possible, and it's amazing. And a lot of people that come to our school, their parents heard of the school from other parents, so they all tell each other and really affect each other and bring them all to our community. And people that reject us, they sometimes we do our best to make them change their minds or really think differently. But if it's their own opinion, they would just stay, and we will really try to get to everyone that are really supportive and try to bring them in and really help them get in this process and change.
I think that families meet. Just because it's a school, and I went to Vicky's house a couple of times, and then our parents were supposed to meet each other and talk to each other, and it was the first time for them as well to speak to an Arab person, to speak to a Palestinian, to drop their kid off on a Palestinian neighborhood in Jerusalem. So it changed their mind and it changed their life too. And I think that's just because our school is also a community and everyone is welcome.
Hi. Thank you very much for what you presented. If I don't cry, then you really, it was very touching. I want to know, is it possible that when you were in the lower grades of school, that you participated in a film about the Israeli and Arabic children dancing? I saw a film from Israel. Did anybody see that
Dancing in
film?
Jaffa.
What was it called?
Dancing in Jaffa.
Dancing in Jaffa. Do you know that film? You must get it. Thank you. You'll love it.
Anybody else?
So also thank you. What you're talking about, I think requires a lot of bravery and personal strength. And I was just wondering if you guys feel really lonely ever, you know, because there's so many people around you who have such different understandings. And like, what do you guys do just for your own self-care? Like, besides be with your friends and be with people who agree with you, which of course you have to do, like, is that part of what you learn over time? Or how do you do that?
Yeah, great question. Well, I can talk about myself that I never feel lonely because I can communicate with Arabs and I can communicate with Jews and I can communicate with Americans and all sorts of people. And that's an advantage because I can speak 3 languages. And also I don't feel ever lonely because I don't only take part in, you know, my religion spaces or my community spaces. Like now, it was really special for me to be this kind of person that can sit and listen to different prayers and see them as really special and see them as really unique in their own way and be able to listen to them and and feel comfortable and feel safe. And it's not a thing that other people can do because each and every one is just related to their own community and their own things that they're used to do, and most of them are not open to sit in a different place. But I think I'm the only Arab person here, and I feel safe and I feel okay and I feel confident and everything is fine, and it's really heartwarming for me to be able to sit here and listen to you guys, and it was amazing. And I never feel lonely, only also in Jerusalem, also and all around the country. Because I know that I can really understand everyone and really communicate with everyone, and that's, I never feel lonely.
I do. Because, I mean, maybe just like 8 months ago when we finished school, so I had to like go to the real world and, I don't know, work in a Jewish place because that was the place for me to work, and it was all Jewish people over there, and none of them came from my school, and I mean, it's not the first time that I faced like maybe some judgment from people who didn't hear about my school or didn't experience it, and I think I was just talking to Noah about it a few days ago, that the people that I can really identify with, the people that I can really agree with, and the most like vulnerable. Yeah, like and sensitive issues in our time are the people who I grew up with, the people who went to my school as well. And I think this is something that you understand was only in our school. Like how to talk about, I mean, just like what Vicky said, like how to understand other people, how to really see them as equal, because I don't think anyone that I've met, you know, my workplace ever saw there are Palestinian people as equal, even though they're less weight or I don't know, wanted to think of themselves as those people. So I think like the alumni organization is like coming back from air from time to time and talk about those things and just feel really comfortable at the place I'm in, because it's not, I mean, it's not an everyday. I mean, I don't feel like that every day. So it's not really for fun, but I go to the organization, the community organization, and I feel really happy.
I want to add something. That I also work and at a store in Mamilla Mall, and most of them are Jews, and the people I work with are also Jews. And I remember one person, now the people I work with, he works in like next to me in other stores. We talked for like a month. He's a Jewish guy. We talked for like a month, and everything was fine. He came to me every day, said good morning, and he didn't know that I'm Arab because I speak Hebrew with no accent. And a month later, after he knew that I'm Arab, he just stopped talking to me. And he stopped saying good morning. And when I come to him and say good morning, he just turned his face away. And like, even though that I spoke his language the same way he does, and I dress the same way his sister does, and I do everything the same, when he knew that I was Arab, he just stopped. So like, even though these people are there, I know that even if I lose everyone, I still have my people, and I still have my friends and the people I grew up with that will never do that to me. And I would never do this to them. So that's also a part of why I don't feel lonely.
I think yeah, I wanted to answer that question also, because, you know, my family also moved to Israel like a few years after me. So both my siblings and my parents, and they have very different takes on what's happening around us, and you know, sometimes I can feel very alone in my family. And I remember when it was the war in Gaza in 2014, we had these marches, in Jaffa and in Galilee and in Jerusalem every day, every 2 times a week in the evenings, sort of stand against the violence that was happening and stand together and reclaiming public space as a place that could be safe for Israelis and Palestinians, that doesn't sort of reframing who's the us and them in this situation, right? Because when there's violence, everyone kind of backs into their corners. And my sister called me one day, like crying with tears. She was crying. She's like, I feel like you're not with us. I feel like you're not standing with your people. And I'm like, I think I am standing with my people. But it's not easy. It's really not easy for her to understand. I think I really understand where she's coming from. But it's really hard for her to understand where I am. And I think, like, what's helpful for me to not feel alone is having the community. Like, I really found a home hand in hand, like in the school. Like, it feels like such a, like she said, like, so even though I'm there as like a staff member, I joined as a staff member. It feels like so much of a home for me in Jerusalem. And I think that my family has like come along with me in their way, in their little baby steps. But yeah.
Does everyone supposed to go to army in Israel, or just Jews, or citizens, or what age?
Good question. Just Jews. Citizens. Yeah. Can I guys answer in like a?
So yeah, Jewish Israeli citizens are drafted into the army.
Also Midland?
And some Arab citizens are. Most are not. Most Arab citizens are not drafted into the army unless you're a Druze or Bedouin. But the Palestinian citizens of Israel are not drafted into the army. So Vicky was not drafted into the army.
But she's citizen, right?
Yes, even though they're citizens of Israel, but they're not drafted into the army.
I'm trying to figure out your 2 stories that you told us that you got from your grandparents and great-grandparents. Vicky, I definitely see your story, something being that your grandparents talked about, something being taken away from you, from them, and that I can understand that resentment from that. On the other side, I saw you not having that type of story. That, you know, it wasn't, you don't have that same sort of story where you're, you know, yes, during the Holocaust, but that's far away. We're talking about now you don't have that type of story. It seems like it's not quite an equal type of pain in some ways.
Yeah. So,
What, Pamela?
yeah. You want to know?
I don't think it's equal. I mean, I know that we're not coming from equal places, me and Vicky. The outside is not equal. And I acknowledge that and I know it, and I want to do everything that I can that this place outside will be equal for both of us, even though we didn't come from the same pain and we don't have the same story. And I mean, I know from where I am, which is a pretty comfortable place in Israel. I mean, I'm Jewish and I'm secular. It's fine. I want to do everything that I can that other people will also feel as comfortable as I am. And yeah, we acknowledge the fact that it's not equal all the time. Also at school and also, I mean, both at school, in dialogues and in classes, and I mean, I can't think of a particular thing, but I think it's always there, and we always talk about it.
I think we really, at school, when we talk about these things, we really try not to compare people's losses and compare pain, right? And these two stories were stories of, the same events, right? How two different people can experience the same event in very, very different ways, and how talking about those histories, which are part of our identity, can be really challenging. In terms of loss, there are definitely a lot of Israeli stories of loss, in wars and in violence and in attacks by terrorists. So that exists, but within that there's also we are not on equal planes here. It's very clear that Israel has a lot more power in the situation than Palestinians do, and within Israeli society is also Jewish Israelis have a lot more power than Arab Israelis, Palestinian citizens of Israel, Arabs living in Israel, and so that needs to be acknowledged and put on the table. We're not coming into the space as two equal parties, even though, if, Gili, a mother who she lost her father in one of the wars, like her pain of loss of a father on an individual level, I'm not going to compare that to the pain of someone else who lost their father on that individual personal level, and there needs to be space for that as well. So we can balance both of those things and really make space for pain in both parties, while still acknowledging in a structural way the balance of power.
I'll take some more questions, but I just want to let me, before anybody leaves, on the counter back there are brochures and articles. And I'd love for everyone to take one. There are plenty there. They have the website, they have email addresses, they have a gift card if you choose to do that. Havurah, many members know about Canada, many members don't. So please do take that so you can stay connected.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much for being here. This is really tremendous, and what a gift and an honor for us to receive this. And it's just a little bit of the understanding that we're getting. I'm wondering, is there in your schedule, and I'm looking at you as well because you may be helping to plan the schedule, for you to talk to a Christian congregation who know not Jews nor Palestinians, but know Christians, and maybe have their own view of what's going on in Israel. And I would imagine that would be a mind blower.
So first of all, Vicky, Alma, and Noah had a really busy schedule. They started in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where they spoke at a synagogue that's also an Episcopal church. It doubles, and it was organized by a group representing 2 synagogues and 3 churches there: Presbyterian Church, Episcopal Church, and another church. On Monday, they're going to the Bay Area. Monday night, they're speaking in an Episcopal church in Burlingame, and Wednesday night at a synagogue, a conservative synagogue in Tiburon in Burlingame County. But one of the things, we talked about sort of asymmetry here. When I raise money, it's primarily in the Jewish community. It's primarily Jewish Americans that are focused on Israel in many different ways across the spectrum. But one of my goals, one of our goals, is to reach out beyond that. There are Muslim Americans that are supporting hand in hand. There are Palestinians in the diaspora that have been supportive. But it's sort of a more diffuse kind of target.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Maybe 2 more questions? Yes. Isaac. Like the beard, by the way.
Thank you. In the U.S., our textbooks, our school textbooks, are textbooks history textbooks are pretty biased against. It pushes a lot of the wrongdoings that the U.S. has done over the years under the carpets, and you know, with the Civil War, there's a lot of stuff about how it's not all about racism and stuff like that. But I'm wondering if in Israel, if you kind of have an equivalent textbook where the textbooks are pretty biased towards one side, and how in a school where your point is to show both sides of the story, how do you deal with those?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, Israel teaches, if we talk about the story that these two girls talked about, right, 1948, what happened in that war, all Israeli schools learn the Israeli narrative of history. So talking about, you know, the history of Israel is taught only from a Jewish Zionist perspective, even in the Arab schools, right? So Arab schools do not learn Palestinian narratives of history or Palestinian identity. They also learn Israeli narrative. And yes, in our schools there's actually a textbook that has Israeli and Palestinian narratives on two sides of a page. And then the teachers use that as a base and then go from there to also teach beyond just two narratives, right? Because there's multiple Palestinian narratives and multiple Israeli narratives. And also just to teach critical thinking in general. So even when we learn other parts of history from other parts of the world, also to think about what are the different perspectives within that.
Maybe one more question, if anyone has one. Yes.
Well, thank you, all three of you. Your stories are so powerful and inspiring, and I'm just kind of in awe of all three of you. You said that you're going into national service instead of the Army. So, if you could explain to us maybe what the difference is, and then in your service, and then is there like a social stigma that's attached to that you're going to have to overcome, and how you plan to fight through that so you can continue on your powerful journey? Because that's amazing. And you're stepping through and actually standing by what you've learned in school to really make a difference. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so it is different. So the Army is different than National Service. So the Army is just going to the IDF from Israel, and National Service is something you are able to do if you don't go to the Army. It's just 40 hours of volunteering in a week for a year or 2 years in whatever place you want to, whatever place will take you. And there's all kinds of places, like really everything you can think of. There's schools and kindergartens and human rights organizations and really everything. I mean, you can volunteer in the police if you want. And that's what I choose to do. And there is, you're right, there is a stigma about it. And I know it's not going to be easy growing up and becoming an adult with this thing that I chose to do. But I also think that I don't want to be friends with people who can't understand who I am. And I don't want to be around people who can't see this as a decision and see my decision as equal as going to the Army. And I think that, I'm going to face this probably lots of times in my life as an adult life. But I think that this is part of my decision. I want to make people change their mind, maybe make people see it as not as what they see every day, like not think about it as they grow up thinking.
Great choice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah.
People might not look at it that way initially, but it is.
So thank you all so much for coming and for listening. And I just want to give another quick thanks and for huge just gratitude for bringing us to lead, not only to here, but none of this would happen if it wasn't for Lee. We really hope that you join us and in whatever way you can in sharing our story, and stay in touch with Lee, and stay in touch with us, and take our materials. Thank you.
Yeah, school.